Okay, everyone. So, welcome to our review session where we are going to cover the two grammatical concepts of unit number 5. So, once again, I'm your instructor, and I'm happy to hear you guys. Let's start. So, the two contents that actually we are going to talk about, or the two sections, or the two grammar topics you want to talk about, or we should talk about, are first relative clauses and willingness, obligation, and necessity once again. So we're going to talk about the modal verbs, of course, that do this or that talk about willingness, obligation, and necessity, and also some expressions that we also have. So starting from section number 1, which is relative clauses, we're gonna start directly from how many types we have, okay? So once again, I will give you a little bit of background information here, guys. Relative clauses, also known as adjective clauses, are just used to talk about or modify a noun. Okay, so that's their main job. They're modifying or they're adding information about a specific noun, okay? And nearly all the time, relative clauses come after the noun that they're talking about. And in English, we have two types of them. One of them is called defining relative clauses, and the other one is called non-defining relative clauses. If we talk about defining relative clauses, those ones are actually those clauses that give essential information about the noun. Okay, they give necessary information about the noun, meaning that it's not really good to cut it out. It's not really good to cut the relative clause or the adjective clause out of your sentence, because if you do so, the meaning also gets cut out, the important meaning. Okay, so people will not actually understand what you're talking about. So it's really good to have it. One example that we have in here is here. It starts with the law. So it says the law which or that was recently passed makes no sense. As you can see, starting from which all the way to past is our relative clause. It's the defining one, and in a way we can say that the information inside this clause, the fact that the law was passed recently, is essential to the overall meaning, okay? And one thing I would just mention, I did mention in the past as well, but I'm going to say it again just to be on the safe side. Don't use which, okay, in defining relative clauses. Now, your book, the Empower series, is doing it, and we have nothing against it, but in more international contexts, like many other ones, like if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, like a lot of good teachers from different universities, when they're talking about it, they mostly say that which is not used with defining relative clauses, which is used for non-defining, and that is used for defining. So just keep that in mind, okay? Another example that we have starts with the man. So the man who he attacked is recovering in hospital. As you can see in here, guys, the man is the noun that we're talking about, okay? So the man alone is not very clear. We don't know what you're talking about. So it's good to have a relative clause, in a way, modifying or giving essential information about the noun that we have, or the man in this case. So if we remove it, it doesn't really work. If I just say, like, the man is recovering in hospital, only the person listening to me, and granted, like, they must have already had a conversation about this person with me, so only they know. But others don't know, and even that person, maybe they have forgotten the conversation and they forgot which man I'm talking about. Once again, is going to create problems. So it's good to have this clause in here and not cut it out. But as you can see, who is sorry, as you can see, who is inside parentheses, so it's optional, and we're going to talk about why it's optional in this line. Okay, so for now, let's continue. So we talked about defining relative clauses. So what about non-defining relative clauses? So the non-defining clauses are not essential, like meaning that the information that they give is not necessary to the overall meaning of the sentence. They're giving us additional information, or they're giving us extra information about the nouns. Okay, so the nouns once again are coming directly before the clauses. Okay, and in non-defining relative clauses, we cannot do two things. Okay, what is number one? We cannot use the relative pronoun that. Okay, so that, as you can see, is a very common one, but we mostly use it with the defining clauses and not with the non-defining. So that is not okay to be used. So remember it. Know that in non-defining. And also, we cannot leave out object pronouns. So this is a little rule that students actually study in, I think, B2, like upper intermediate. I mean, you kind of maybe remember it. If our clauses was like if our clauses were defining relative clauses, and the relative pronoun that we have in here, like who, which, or that, whatever, they could also be the object pronoun and not the subject pronoun. As you can see in here, it is the object who he attacked, because he is the actual subject, so who becomes the object. When we had these kind of conditions, then we could have just left out the pronoun, the object pronoun. But in non-defining clauses, we cannot do that. Okay, so remember it. Two things we cannot do. We cannot use that as the relative pronoun, and we cannot leave out object pronouns in non-defining clauses. Okay, one more thing just I need to mention is like about who. Like if you want to be very, very formal, it's okay to say whom, because whom is the how do you say, the widely recognized and accepted form of the word that we have to use for objects. Okay, so object pronouns, it's okay to use whom. It's actually better to use whom, but not anymore. Like in modern English, people are like rarely using whom. So just keep that in mind next time you come across something like this. So some examples that we have about non-defining clauses. As you can see in here, guys, the noun that we're talking about is German law. So German law by itself is very, very specific. It doesn't need any information. So it's the information that you're going to give to it is not essential. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so the information that you're giving here, about German law is not essential, meaning that it's extra. It's additional. If you want to have it, have it. If you don't want to have it, don't have it. It's okay. So German law is quite different. My sentence is correct in here. But if I add, a relative clause or a non-defining relative clause, my sentence would just get more information. My noun in here, in this case, will get more information. Like German law, which is based on Roman law, is quite different. Okay? And one thing, as we mentioned here, two things that we cannot do, but one of them is, shown in here and illustrated. That is that. Okay, the relative pronoun that cannot come and replace which in here. Okay, even though which and that both can talk about things in general, but in here it cannot do that because it's non-defining clause. And then you have the other one, another example, like saying the victim, who we cannot name for security reasons, is recovering in hospital. Once again, the information inside here, as shown in the book here, is supposed to be additional, so meaning it's extra and it's not necessary to the overall meaning. So in other words, if I say the victim is recovering in hospital, my sentence would be correct. People will not have any problems with that, okay? But if I say the victim who we cannot name for security reasons, my sentence is still correct. It's actually just, you know, how do you say, sprinkled in a way where it has a little more information in this case. It has a dressing of information on top. So very easy. And condition two that we had in here, sorry, that said that we cannot leave out object pronouns, even though who in this case is acting like an object pronoun because we have a subject by itself, we. It's said that we cannot remove that. So we cannot say the victim and then pause. Like the victim, we cannot name for security reasons, is recovering in hospital. Okay, that doesn't just work. Just be careful of that. And one little note at the end says that non-defining relative clauses are separated by commas. Okay, they're separated by commas in writing, and of course in speaking, we just separate them by pauses, like pauses of 0.2 seconds or 0.5 seconds based on your own natural speed. Okay, so we're done with slide number 1. Let's continue. So in the next part, guys, we're talking about relative pronouns. So what are they and how to use them? So you already know the most common ones, the 3 most common ones we have in here: who, which, and that.
Fully charged battery, fully charged.
Sorry,
Unplugged charger.
my phone is again fully charged. Okay, so we already have 3 of them: who, which, and that, and everybody knows that. But if we continue in here, we also have some other ones that many people don't really use many times. They're when, where, and why. So let's talk about it. When you have nouns that refer to time, okay, when you have nouns that refer to time, you can either use when or you can use that. Okay, so what are those words that refer to time? Time itself, so the word time itself can also refer to time, and the word day can refer to time. And those words that come after place, or they come after the word, like, oh, sorry. Yeah, they come after place, or they come after somewhere, whatever. Like these ones, that can also refer to the place in this case, like place and somewhere. And the same thing as, you kind of guessed it by the pattern here, where can also do that. But that is also more common, okay? However, once you know this, like you already know 2 different ways. You can use that or you can use when and where. But you also have a third way. The third way says that you can just use no pronoun. But be very careful, guys. Using no pronoun is very informal. Okay, so, if you want to do that, of course, be my guest. For example, the 1930s was the time when organized crime flourished. This sentence is very good. It's very, formal, or even if it's not very formal, it's just normal. It's really good. If you say that, still it's correct. Not the most formal sentence out there, but it still is correct. But if I just don't say it altogether, any of them, my sentence would be correct, but it would be informally correct, okay? So the 1930s was the time organized crime flourished with no relative pronoun, okay? And then you have another example that says, take me somewhere. This is about the place. So the word somewhere, or as shown in here, and the word and the word place can also talk about places in general. So take me somewhere where I can relax, that I can relax, or just I can relax, okay? Like any of them will work. Any of them will work. And then you have the last one, which is about why in this case. After the word reason, you again have 3 different techniques. After the word reason, you can use the word why, you can use the word that, or you can use the word, not the word, but actually the technique of no pronoun, meaning that not why and not that, just directly your other clause. These things can work, and of course, no pronoun would be okay, but a little bit informal. Okay? For example, does anyone know the reason crime is so high? It's okay, but if you want to say it with the addition of the relative pronouns, you can say like, does anyone know the reason why crime is so high? Or does anyone know the reason that crime is so high? And the same thing goes on for the other sentences that you can make in the future. For example, does anyone know the reason why um, laptops are so expensive now? Just a little side example for you. Okay, so we are done with this as well. What do we have in the next slide? In the next slide, guys, as you can see, we have which now. Okay, so which is also one of the most common ones, or one of the most common relative pronouns in all of adjective clauses. But Can we just use them as normally, like every time just talking about things? Not really. You can also use which to completely talk about a whole clause and not just a noun or a noun phrase. So, in many different places, let me see if I can bring my pen. Yes, I can bring it. It sorry. In many different places, guys, this one or this usage of which actually has its own name. It actually has its own name. They just call it a situational, yeah, okay, a situational relative clause. So, like, next to defining and non-defining, some places also call something, or they have something as situational relative clause. So, this situational relative clause is kind of this usage of which, okay, where it doesn't talk about just one noun, as we mentioned all the other ones do. This one talks about a whole clause, okay? For example, okay, so she lied on her interview form. She lied on her interview form, which was a bad sign. So it doesn't mean, like, which in here is not directly talking about interview form, okay? It's talking about all the clause, okay? It's talking about what? All the clause. And all the clause says that she lied on the interview form, okay? So that's the whole point. So, in a way, we can say that lying on the interview form was a bad sign. Okay, let me just write it for you. Lying on the interview form was a bad sign. So, that's like the whole meaning of this sentence. Okay, and if you use it like that, if you use like which to talk about the complete clause before it, you're doing yourself a favor and you're actually getting some very good advanced sentences. So another one is like we all get on well, which is fantastic. So the fact that everybody gets on well, meaning that everybody does not fight with each other, like everybody's happy with each other, that's fantastic. And you can use which, in the situational clause style to talk about it. We also have another point in here, so let's talk about that. It says that we can use which after prepositions, okay? We can use which after prepositions and before nouns. But where? Every time? Not really. We mostly use them, guys, in fixed expressions, okay, or fixed phrases. And these fixed phrases need memorization, okay, so you have to memorize them. That's kind of the best way that you can do it. It's really good. Just memorize them and you can make many, many more sentences once you get the hang of it, okay? So what do I mean? For example, one of the most common ones is this one, in which case, or the chance of which, or at which time, or the result or the outcome or the consequence of which, or the likelihood of which is a very formal phrase, as you can see in here. Some examples that we can give for them, for example, it would seem that the guilty person has been found. In which case, our fixed phrase in here is, in which case you are free to go. So as you can see in all of these fixed phrases, we're also using which. So which has a lot of usages, guys. You just have to memorize these fixed phrases for future use, okay? It's really good. Another one can be like a major police operation started, the result of which was that 6 people were arrested. So, like, we can give another sentence as well, like, at which time, like, you can say that. Let me just bring something to write in here. Okay. So, we can say the Afghan people need, okay, what do we say? I don't really know what to say. Yeah, the Afghan people want better education. Okay. At which time the Okay, I think that's not going to fit very well. Let me just change this up a little bit. The Afghan people, let's go with the past, The Afghan people went to the parliament. I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right. Okay, the Afghan people went to the parliament, at which time, oh, I was not spelling it right. Sorry. Yeah, the Afghan people went to the parliament, at which time the US president also came and signed some autographs. Like, I don't know, guys, what I'm saying here, but of course it's grammatically right, so we're gonna keep it. So yeah, these kind of sentences, guys, you can make many more once you know how to use these ones and what meanings they actually have, in their core, in their essence. Okay, so try to memorize these ones. Try to memorize these fixed phrases with which, and also try to learn how to use situational relative clauses, once again using which. So let me just remove this and slowly continue. Okay, so going to the other slide. Okay, so in the next slide we have some other relative pronouns, and those are who, whom, and whose. So kind of people think that they're from the same family, but not really. Okay, so let's talk about it. We usually use who as the subject and object in relative clauses. Now be very careful, guys. Your book did not mention it. Oh my god. Okay, so I cannot bring my pen again, so I'm just gonna use the cursor once again. Yeah, the book did not really mention, guys, but as said before, in very formal occasions, it's good to use whom as the object and not who. Like in here, it says that we can usually use who as the subject and the object, and it's okay. In modern English, people are doing that, but just be careful, In very formal places, it's okay not to use it, okay? So, but we can use whom in formal written languages. It's also written here, but be very careful, guys, that whom is only for object. Okay, so in formal written language, even if you're talking about subject, whom is not okay to use. Okay, or yeah, I think yeah. Okay, so continuing, then you have like we use whom, not who, after prepositions. Now this is another little point that we need to talk about. Many of these, adjective clauses or relative clauses, they have prepositions, and those prepositions actually come from the verbs that we have. Okay, so those ones, like if you want to sound very formal, we can also put them before. Okay, we can mostly put them before the relative pronoun in this case. And if you put them before, like in here, to whom, it's always advised to use whom and not who, because those does not work. Okay, for example, Mr. Brown, who or whom the police suspect of arson, was released without charge. So in here, who is okay, whom is okay, but whom is a little bit more formal. And then in here, you have the one that uses the preposition technique. So for example, Mr. White, to whom the police gave a caution, is kind of like the police gave a caution to Mr. White. So this to from the preposition, from the verb comes in here. If you want to sound very formal, okay, was held overnight. But it's not good to say Mr. White to who the police gave a caution, okay? So when you're using it like this, when you want to be formal, so use whom as well, because it's made for the formal language in this case. And then you have the last one about whose that says we use whose as a possessive of people and animals. Now, I do agree with this 100%. You can use that. Many people even don't, especially in Afghanistan, I mean, they don't really even think that whose can be used with animals, but it's okay. You can use that. You can use whose if we're talking about the possession of people and animals. but also about things. I don't know why the book did not mention it, but you can also use whose to talk about the possession of things, okay? For example, the old lady, okay, the old lady whose bag was taken was really upset. So as you can see in here, whose bag, it's talking about like, the the bag belonged to the old lady. Like that's the whole point of whose in this case, okay? So the old lady whose bag was taken, and from whose all the way to taken is your adjective clause, and then you have was really upset, which is the continuation of your actual sentence. Kind of like the old lady was really upset. Okay, but why was she upset? Then the information you can put there using whose. The old lady whose bag was taken was really upset. Okay, you can do the same with things. I'm gonna give you one example. Unfortunately, I cannot write it, but okay, so let's say, yeah, the door, for example, the door whose handle is red belongs to Mr. Brown. So it means like if you go to the door that has a red handle, the person living on the other side of it will be Mr. Brown. Okay, continuing a little bit. So another list of pronouns that we have are none of whom, all of which, and some of whose. So how can we make some more of these? So focus on this, guys. We can use quantifiers, okay? Words that talk about quantity or quantity in American English. We can use quantifiers like some, like none, or like few with the phrases like of whom, of which, and of whose. Okay, remember, other ones don't work. Of whom, of which, and of whose. In where can we only use it, guys? In non-defining relative clauses. So not the other ones, okay? We can use them in non-defining relative clauses. So they can be three suspects were interviewed. Okay, good. All of whom were released without charge. So in a way it means like three suspects were interviewed and they were all released without charge. But if you don't want to sound so basic and you want to sound like a little bit advanced, use the grammar of it, of advanced English, okay? So all of whom. Another one is like Carter is accused of three crimes, none of which he admits to, meaning that again, Carter is accused of three crimes and he admits to none of them. Okay, but if you want to say like this, it's just going to be better. Okay, continuing. So what about these pronouns, guys? What about whoever? What about whatever? What about wherever? And what about whenever? So when you're using indefinite pronouns like these, like whoever, whatever, wherever, whenever, to mean like the person who, the thing that, it's very good. You can use these ones once again, kind of the same as these other, pronouns as the pronouns of your relative clauses. Okay. For example, the meanings are very clear. So whoever means the person who, and whatever means the thing that, wherever means the place that, whenever means the time that, and it just goes on. Okay. For example. Yeah, in a way. So whoever stole my sausage from the fridge is in big trouble. So it's called indefinite because like it's not known. You don't know who stole it, and when you say whoever, it's just going to, you know, put emphasis. It's just going to emphasize the actual fact that you don't care who stole the sausage. You just need to find them. Because if you find that person, no matter who that person is, be it the president, be it the, I don't know, your teacher, be it your best friend, anyone, doesn't matter. That person will be in trouble. That's what you mean. So whoever, whatever, wherever, and whenever. And there's a tip here. Let's read it. What is actually not a relative pronoun? Good. We should know that. What is not a relative pronoun? We use it as a noun to mean the thing which. For example, young people today don't know what they want. So, as you can see, it's not an actual relative pronoun. We're actually using it just as a noun to mean the thing which. So you can say like young people don't know the thing they want, the thing they want, or the thing which they want, or the thing that they want. In a way, using what is just going to reduce the number of words you have to use in your relative clauses. But technically it's not a relative pronoun. Okay, so what about some prepositions in relative clauses? I think we talked about a little bit, but let's just go over it. We usually put prepositions at the end of relative clauses, but we can put them before. Sorry. Yeah, but we can put them before the relative pronoun in formal language as well. So meaning that if you put it before the relative pronoun like which or whom, it will be more formal. But if you put at the end, it's just normal. It's just modern English, and everybody will like it. For example, prison is not the kind of place that you would want to spend time in. So if you want to bring this up here, you also have to change that. Okay, you're going to change that to which. For example, prison is not the kind of place in which you would want to spend time. So as you can see, we're taking the preposition directly and we're putting it all the way before the relative pronoun. Okay, but what about some multi-word verbs, or what about some multi-word verbs, also called phrasal verbs? So as you all know, guys, phrasal verbs, the structure is very simple. It has a verb plus a participle, plus a particle, okay? And there are four types of them in general, but type number four, the other ones are okay, so they don't really have that much a problem, but type number four actually has two different particles. So in here, see, put up with, put is the verb, up is particle number one, and with is particle number two. What to do with these kind of things? So let's talk about it. We keep the particles with the multi-word verbs, meaning that if you have phrasal verbs, we are keeping the particle with the verb and not separate them. Okay, for example, the children who I look after. So the verb is look, and after is the particle. Even though after in this case is a preposition, I am not able to put it, use the formal technique and bring it all the way here. Okay, it doesn't work. Even if I change whom to whom, even if I change who to whom, it doesn't work. For example, I cannot say the children after whom I look. It doesn't give you the meaning, okay? These ones should not be separated. And then you have this one. Stealing from the kitchen is something which we will not put up with. So it's not good to say that stealing from the kitchen is something with which we will not put up. Again, doesn't really give a lot of good meaning, so people will just get confused as to what the phrasal verb itself actually means. Okay, so it's okay to keep the particles with the verb and not, separate them. Okay, so we have some exercises. I'm just gonna stop the recording and come to you if you have any questions. So everyone, let's now continue with section number 2, which is about willingness, showing willingness in English, showing obligation in English, and showing necessity in English. Okay, so let's start with obligation and necessity itself. We are actually using must and have to, okay, to say what is necessary. And be very careful, guys, that must can only refer to the present or to the future. So it does not have the ability to go and talk about the past, at least not by itself, okay? For example, I'll have to, or I must get some more qualifications soon. Now this is okay. It's kind of talking about the future because you're using also the time frame here, like soon, but be very careful that you're using must and have to for talking about something which is necessary. So it's necessary for this person, or for you in this case, to get qualifications. Or Irene had to go on a business trip, so I took her to the airport. Now when you say this, okay, it's okay. have to can talk about all the three main tenses, past, present, and future. You just need to change the form. So have changes to had, and it's correct. But must doesn't work. Even if you use the past modal and use the technique of must have gone or must and have plus verb 3, that one also does not work. So be very careful, not work. Okay. We have another structure here, guys. Have got to plus infinitive or verb number one base form also describes what is necessary. Okay, but especially when you're talking about arrangements, things that have already been arranged. Yeah. Okay. For example, my boss said I've got to be in the office by 8 tomorrow. So when you say that my boss said I've got to be, you're showing that it is necessary, but you're just adding like a little implied meaning to the overall sentence that this event, this event or this action is arranged. So they have talked with you, like, yeah, you got to be there, man. So it is an arrangement that at 8 o'clock you must be in the office, so it has already been arranged and it's talking about something necessary. Have got to plus verb number one. Okay, we can also use must, okay, when we decide what is necessary, and have to when other people decide. So in a way, I mostly talk about it in terms of like must is for the inner force and have to is for the outer force. So when you're getting some obligation or necessity, or you're talking about necessity and obligation, mostly they're coming from two different places. It's either from inside or it's from outside. If it's from inside, you think that you have to do it, you think that it's necessary. If it comes from outside, maybe your father, your mother, like other people tell you that it's necessary and you have to do it. When you're talking about something inside forced, must is the better choice. And if you're talking about something from outside, you can use have to. Examples: I must tell you what Jane said in the office. You think it's necessary. Others don't. But if you say that I've cleaned the floors, what do I have to do next? You're asking that I don't think it's necessary to do something else. But, if you tell me that, okay, the floors are clean, so now go and, I don't know, clean the TVs, clean the windows. So you think it's necessary, but of course I will do it, but you think it's necessary and not me. Okay, so that's the whole point of it. Okay, we can also use should, okay, and ought to, which is kind of the more formal brother of should, to say what is the right thing to do. So in a way, advice. We just call it advice, okay? We also have it in the other point in here, but, just think of it. It's okay. Advice and right thing to do, they're kind of the same thing. So you can say like, I ought to organize, or I ought to organize my time more effectively, or you shouldn't do unpaid overtime. Okay, shouldn't do. In a way that, you can say like should and ought to, both of them are followed by an infinitive. Both of them are followed by a verb number one base form. Okay, and you can also use had better. You can use what, guys? Had better plus an infinitive once again in giving advice and giving threats. So both of them, something very positive and also something very negative. Okay, we're using had better plus an infinitive. And a little technique with had better, guys, is that when you want to say it faster, we mostly use a contraction apostrophe D, as you can see in here. So, like, you don't really say she had better see a doctor, you just say she'd better. She'd better. But if you want to be even faster, but not for writing, okay, for writing you have to write it, but if you want to be even faster in saying it, you can even drop the had. Just don't get caught, okay? Be very fast that, you shouldn't get caught. You just say, like, she better see. She better see a doctor before it's too late, or you better be early tomorrow. That's the whole point of it. Be fast, be fluent, and don't get caught. But if you are writing it somewhere, you can either use the apostrophe technique or completely write the full version, had better plus base form verb number one. Continuing, we can use be supposed to plus infinitive or base form to say what is necessary. According to what, guys? According to some rules or instructions. So when you're talking about some rules and instructions and saying that this is necessary because of the that rule or rule number 2 or rule number 3, we're using the structure be supposed to plus infinitive. Okay, for example, the finance director is supposed to authorize all major expenditure. So in a way, it's saying that it's not something that he is actually just doing, out of the kindness of his heart. It's the rule, it's the instruction that he has to follow. So it's necessary for him to follow. He is supposed to do that. Same thing like I was supposed to read the report by tomorrow, but I never got time, meaning that it was necessary. And according to what? According to rule or instruction, maybe my boss told me to read and review the report, but I forgot to do it. But I was supposed to. That just shows necessity that wasn't done, that wasn't met. Okay. So we have a tip here. We can use it's up to plus the person plus whether to say somebody is not obliged or is not obligated to do something in informal language. So if you want to say it in informal language that a person doesn't have to do something, right? So you're giving them the chance, to whether do it or not, or you're giving them the choice to even decide whether to do something or not. You can use the structure it's up to plus the person plus whether. Okay, for example, it's up to you whether you take this job, but I think it's a great offer. So after whether, you are using a clause, okay, a subject verb pairing, and of course it can continue as well. For example, some more sentences can be it is up to the president whether the people can get more jobs or not. So when you have a sentence like this, once again it works. It's talking about like in informal language, it's saying that the person is not obligated to do that. So it is up to the president. Like he can decide whether people should get more jobs or people should not get more jobs. Continuing. Okay, so these are just some phrases. I'm gonna go over them only from here, all the way to here, and not talking about the actual examples. So these phrases, guys, need to be actually memorized and used and practiced if you want to learn them correctly. So the next two other slides, I think, also have this, other versions of the table, but in a way, all of them need to be memorized. So, what do these phrases do? What do these phrases mean? These phrases, guys, are used for obligation and no obligation based on each of them, so the meaning can be different. One thing that you should know that all of them are followed by the structure 2 plus base form. Okay? For example, need to, verb number 1, don't need to, verb number 1, and needn't, verb number 1. Or have no choice but, again, structure continues. It's showing obligation. Let me also tell you what they show, okay? And need to shows obligation. Don't need to shows no obligation, yes. Needn't also shows no obligation. Have no choice but shows obligation. Be allowed shows obligation. Be allowed, sorry, shows no obligation because you're yeah, it shows no obligation. You are allowed to do whatever you want. Be expected to shows kind of obligation. Be free to shows no obligation. Be required to, verb number 1, shows obligation. And it's a very formal phrase. Be advisable to shows obligation in a way, like you are using very soft word in here, like advise, but it's kind of obligation. Protective clothing is advisable. It's kind of like you go to an office and they say, like, um, how do you say, respecting each other is advisable, but you have to respect each other, right? Because if you don't, they're just gonna fire you. So in a way, they're using soft words, but it's actually obligation. Be permitted to is showing no obligation because you're allowed to do something. Forbidden to or be forbidden to is showing obligation. Be essential to, which is a very formal word or a phrase, it shows obligation again. Be obliged to is a formal word and it just means to be obligated. They can also be interchanged completely, like be obligated or be obliged. And the last one, be under obligation, is the formal version, both either the negative or the positive. They're both formal. If you say be under obligation, it shows obligation, but if you say be under no obligation, it shows no obligation. So these are some phrases that we use for willingness, talking about willingness or the fact that the person wants to do something and is not forced by anyone whatsoever. These are the phrases for that to show that the person wants to do that. You can use will or can plus base form. You can use be happy or be willing plus to plus base form. You can use be prepared to plus infinitive or base form, or you can use be prepared. Um, okay, yeah, be prepared plus this one, for plus noun, or noun phrase or gerund. All of them can work in there. Have no objection to plus verb ing, also called gerund or a normal noun. Either way it works. Showing up willingness again, sorry, shows that you want to do that. You're not forced by anyone. To have nothing against a verb ing or gerund, or to have nothing against a noun, again shows willingness to do that. Like you're not forced by anyone. And to have no problem with a gerund or activity or a noun, once again shows willingness, meaning that you don't have any problem. For example, my husband has no problem with looking after the kids while I'm in the office. So it shows that the husband is willing to do it, like he is happy to do that, the structure. He's happy to look after the kids, he's not forced by anyone. So yeah. And the other one is, of course, exercises. I'm gonna stop the recording, and if you have any questions, you can ask. And yeah, and we're done, guys. So thank you. And thank you all for also watching the video. I mean, again, you guys are my students, so you're gonna do some review. So thank you for doing review. Okay, so bye bye, guys, and let me just remove the recording. Bye bye.